owning a home has long been seen as a key milestone in life. It represents stability, success, and a sense of achievement. But today, that dream is becoming more elusive than ever, particularly in wealthy nations like the US, Australia, and Canada. Home prices and rents have skyrocketed to levels that are pushing more and more people out of the housing market and into a permanent rental cycle. What's driving these insane price increases? Why is it becoming so difficult to afford a home? In this video, we'll explore the complex web of economic, social, and political factors that have made housing so unaffordable in many parts of the world. At the heart of the housing crisis lies a fundamental economic principle: supply and demand. The demand for housing, especially in major cities, far exceeds the available supply. In the US, the population has been steadily growing, and more people are migrating to urban areas in search of better job opportunities, education, and lifestyle amenities. However, the rate of home building hasn't kept up. According to a study by Freddie Mac, the US housing market was short 3.8 million homes in 2020, a gap that continues to grow. The shortage of new homes creates fierce competition among buyers, driving up prices for both purchasing and renting. Australia faces a similar issue. Cities like Sydney and Melbourne are experiencing population booms, but stringent zoning laws and a limited amount of land for development make it difficult to build new homes fast enough to meet demand. Urban sprawl is constrained by geography, infrastructure limitations, and government regulations, pushing property prices even higher in desirable areas. For a long time, low interest rates made buying a home more affordable. Central banks, particularly in the US and Canada, kept interest rates historically low to stimulate the economy following the 2008 financial crisis. This allowed buyers to borrow money cheaply, fueling demand for homes and helping push prices up even further. But with inflation now surging, those days are over. Central banks are raising interest rates to cool down overheated economies, and higher interest rates make mortgages more expensive. In Canada, for example, the Bank of Canada has raised interest rates multiple times over the past year, significantly increasing the cost of borrowing. Even a small rise in mortgage rates can mean hundreds of dollars more in monthly payments for buyers. This has locked many out of the market entirely, forcing them to either stay in their current home or turn to renting. In the US, rising interest rates have had a similar impact. Higher rates have slowed down the number of buyers entering the market, but it hasn't led to a significant drop in home prices. Instead, the monthly cost of owning a home has increased, as borrowers are forced to pay more in interest. This makes housing even less affordable, especially for first-time buyers who are trying to break into the market. In addition to local buyers, wealthy foreign investors have been a major driver of rising home prices in cities like Vancouver, Sydney, and New York. Real estate in these cities is viewed as a stable and profitable investment by foreign buyers, particularly from countries with less stable economies. Investors from China, for example, have poured billions of dollars into real estate in cities around the world, often buying properties as a safe place to park their wealth. In Vancouver, foreign investment has been so significant that it has reshaped the housing market. At one point, it was estimated that nearly 1 in 10 homes in the most expensive parts of the city were owned by non-residents. These homes often sit empty, as investors are not looking to live in them, but to hold them as an appreciating asset. The result: a housing market that is increasingly out of reach for local residents who are priced out by wealthy international buyers. Australia has also felt the effects of foreign investment, particularly in its largest cities. Foreign buyers, attracted by Australia's strong economy and political stability, have driven up prices in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. This has led to a backlash from local residents and policymakers, with the Australian government introducing taxes and restrictions on foreign buyers to try to cool down the market. But despite these measures, prices remain stubbornly high. One of the most frustrating aspects of the housing crisis is that while home prices and rents have soared, wages have barely budged. In the US, the median home price has increased by over 100% in the last 2 decades, but wages have only grown by about 30%. This growing gap between incomes and housing costs has left many potential buyers stuck in the rental market, unable to save for a down payment or qualify for a mortgage. In Australia, the situation is similar. The cost of living, including housing, has far outpaced wage growth, making home ownership an increasingly distant dream for many Australians. Even those with stable middle-class jobs are finding it hard to break into the market as property prices in desirable areas continue to climb. Canada has seen some of the sharpest increases in housing costs relative to incomes. In cities like Toronto and Vancouver, the average home now costs more than 10 times the median household income. This has made it nearly impossible for younger generations to afford homes, leaving them trapped in the rental market, where rents are also rising at an alarming rate. The supply issue isn't just about demand, it's also about the cost of building new homes. In many countries, the cost of construction has soared due to rising material prices, labor shortages, and supply chain disruptions. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated these problems, pushing up the price of essential materials like lumber, steel, and concrete. In the US, lumber prices alone spiked by more than 300% during the pandemic, adding tens of thousands of dollars to the cost of building a new home. But it's not just material costs that are driving up the price of housing. Local regulations and zoning laws also play a huge role. In cities like San Francisco and New York, strict zoning laws limit the amount of land available for new housing developments. This creates artificial scarcity, pushing prices higher in these already expensive markets. Australia faces similar challenges. In Sydney, for example, zoning restrictions make it difficult for developers to build new housing in the city centre, where demand is highest. Instead, new developments are pushed to the outskirts of the city, where transportation and infrastructure are less developed, making these homes less desirable for buyers and renters alike. As buying a home becomes increasingly out of reach, more people are turning to renting. But this shift has created a new crisis: soaring rents. In the US, the average rent has increased by more than 15% in just the last year, with some cities seeing even steeper hikes. In Austin, Texas, for example, rents have shot up by nearly 40% in the past 2 years, driven by an influx of new residents and a limited supply of rental properties. In Canada, the situation is no better. Toronto and Vancouver, already some of the most expensive cities in the world, have seen rents skyrocket as more people are priced out of the housing market. The lack of affordable housing options pushes more people into the rental market, which in turn drives rents even higher. Australia's rental market is similarly strained. Sydney and Melbourne have experienced significant increases in rental prices as more Australians are forced to rent instead of buy. This creates a vicious cycle. With rents rising, it becomes harder for renters to save for a down payment on a home, trapping them in the rental market for longer. Governments in these countries have tried to address the housing crisis through various policies, but the impact has been limited. In the US, programs aimed at increasing affordable housing have struggled to keep up with demand. While rent control laws in places like New York and California have helped some renters, they've also had unintended consequences, such as reducing the overall supply of rental properties. In Australia, the government has introduced measures like stamp duty concessions and grants for first-time home buyers, but these policies have done little to cool the red-hot housing market. In fact, some critics argue that these programs may actually be driving prices higher by increasing demand without addressing the underlying supply issues. Canada has taken steps to address foreign investment, including imposing taxes on non-resident buyers in Vancouver and Toronto. However, these measures have not been enough to bring down prices in cities that are already among the most expensive in the world. So, where does this leave the future of homeownership? For many, the prospect of owning a home is growing more distant with each passing year. While governments and policymakers continue to search for solutions, the fundamental issues of supply and demand, rising construction costs, and wage stagnation remain unresolved. For now, the housing market seems to favor the wealthy, investors, and those with high incomes. Meanwhile, younger generations and middle-income families are increasingly locked out of the market, forced to rent and watch home prices rise further out of reach. The dream of owning a home hasn't completely vanished, but it's no longer the easy milestone it once was. The housing market has become a battleground where only the most financially prepared can thrive. For the rest, the struggle continues. If you found this video insightful and want to learn more about the forces shaping our world, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We have more content coming your way. See you in the next video.